It's a really great pleasure to welcome the working artist and writer, Monica Petzal. And alongside what Monica and I will be discussing, you can also see more about her and her work on her website, monicapetzal.com. So Monica, we first met a few years ago, and it was very nice to see you again at the recent Holocaust testimony. So perhaps you could give us some context and an introduction to the film that we're about to see.
Yes, well, firstly to say that both my parents were members of the AJR, and that my father and his company used to take out an advert every month in the AJR magazine, his metal company. So it was firmly embedded in the household. I made this film because I and my family went to Berlin in September to lay Stolpersteine for our family. And that had been 3 years in the making. And I'm delighted to see that the coordinator of the Stolpersteine Berlin, or one of them, Theodor Brucker, is on this Zoom. So he's waving there, who was a fantastic help for us. And I made it because I'm a working artist and I've made exhibitions. And in fact, this, Michael has seen this, is the catalogue of the big exhibition I made in Leicester 3 years ago. But the problem with exhibitions is that they come and then they go. And this one in particular came and went very fast because of COVID. And I decided that making a film was a much better way to make the ideas that I'm thinking about accessible. And also on this Zoom is Eileen Herring-Woods, who's a very fine filmmaker and editor who lives near me in Suffolk. And she was instrumental in me being able to put this together. Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah. And I think it would be fine now to go into the film, which is just over 15 minutes long.
Anwesende. Mein Name ist Theo Bröcker, ich bin Mitglied der Stolpersteine-Initiative Berlin-Mitte und darf Sie im Namen unserer Initiative zur heutigen Steinverlegung begrüßen. Wir verlegen heute 7 Steine für Angehörige der Familie Petzal, für Selma Petzal und ihren Sohn Werner. Beide haben bis 1937 in diesem Haus gelebt. Sie sind dann in die Niederlande geflüchtet. In den Niederlanden hat Werner geheiratet, Fanny aus Frankfurt. Die haben 3 Kinder bekommen, Bernhard und die Zwillinge Robert und Elisabeth, die im Lager Westerbork geboren wurden. Dieser Zweig der Familie ist nach der Besetzung der Niederlande durch deutsche Truppen nach Auschwitz deportiert worden und dort ermordet worden. Der andere Sohn der Familie, Harry, hat bis 1939 hier gewohnt und ihm ist die Flucht nach England geglückt. Und ja, wir dürfen heute die Kinder von Harry hier begrüßen. Für mich ist es immer sehr bewegend, wenn bei Stolpersteinverlegungen Angehörige anwesend sind, die trotz allem, was ihnen von Deutschen, was ihrer Familie von den Deutschen angetan worden ist, nach Deutschland kommen. Danke, dass ihr gekommen seid. Thank you for coming.
I said I had a flight really early next morning, the day after. Yeah, and it was, I did it because I did a element show for an Arsenal game. I get home, but no, at 11.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for screening that. And Monica, thank you for making that film. I mean, it's emotional, difficult to watch for me. I don't know about for others watching here. I guess how do you feel now watching it again and in front of an audience, sharing your very personal, intimate story? Must be a very difficult thing to do.
I just thought it was a really important thing to do. And the incident that really galvanized me was in 2018 going to visit Camp Westerbork, because in my previous work, I'd focused a lot on my other German family who come from Dresden, about whom I knew an awful lot. And we laid Stolpersteine in Dresden for that family a long time ago. But it wasn't until 2018 that I went to Holland and I went to Camp Westerbork, which is a very bleak place in the north of Holland. And it was there at the desk in the reception area that I asked the people there whether there was an archivist. And they said, yes, wait a minute. And this very charming elderly man came out to meet me. And I said, well, my family were deported from here. And he said, write down their names for me. And I wrote them down. And he said, don't move, I'm coming back. And he came back with those two photos. The ones, now I'm slightly wondering if the film jumped a bit. I didn't see them immediately. The ones of my uncle and his wife and my grandmother walking through a passageway. And then the one of him and his wife and the baby. But these were pictures that I had never seen. And they truly shocked me, like very little has.
I'm sure it's extremely powerful, but also in a way testament to the archiving and the collecting that has been done by museums, Holocaust museums and memorials. Obviously Westerbork is one, Auschwitz is another one which is referenced there, and Theresienstadt, where there's a lot more information available as to the fate of what happened. Just a bit of background. Was this subject talked about when you were younger, the fate of family? Was this something that you personally decided to find out about?
No, in classic terms, my father never spoke about his family. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing. And one of the things I was able to do in Holland was, because they did archive everything, is get the documents on the case, as they call it, and be in contact with the family who owned the house in Hilversum that my family stayed in before they were deported. And also I went to Hilversum. Now, oddly enough, my son, who is just a little bit younger than my uncle would have been when he died and has children the same age, has moved to Amsterdam, which I find very poignant. And I was just able to get on the train from Amsterdam to Hilversum and go and see the house where the family lived. And it was empty, and I sneaked around the back and I was able to take photos of the conservatory, which were exactly the same as they were in the 1940s. Yeah,
there's many sort of symmetries and parallels here, in as much as if we look at the dates of the birth of the twins and then the deportation, it's obviously at the very end of the war. The military war is almost finished, because of course the Americans are coming up through the south. D-Days happened June 44, and yet there are still deportations carrying on from those parts of Europe to the east. And it's now very much, I mean, it was always an ideological war against the Jews, but this is continuing despite the imminent military defeat that's coming. And also you contrast the ages. You've got people born, your grandmother in 1881, and then the twins born in 43. And it's a huge range of people and ages of people, of course. But commemorating them all now in this place, I guess you had those documents from Yad Vashem, which is a page's testimony. But I guess this is the first physical memorial to those members of the family.
Absolutely, and it's Theodore Brucker, who's on this Zoom call, was really instrumental in suggesting that the children and the wife, none of whom lived in that house in Berlin, had their place there. Because, of course, the idea of Stolpersteine is that they are put outside the last residence of choice.
Yes.
And, of course, that the Fanny and the children had no choice. They were on the run by the time they were born and by the time she was married to Werner. So it was Theo's idea that this would be a suitable place for them to have their Stolpersteine. So instead of there just being my grandmother and her son Werner, who we absolutely know lived in the house, we had lots of documentation, the family are gathered together there, which is really very moving.
And together we have built this event to screen the film, but also in the context of anti-Semitism. And Stolpersteine are one of the resources, I guess, one of the features, one of the part of the landscape in German cities and towns, which mark places of residence, as you say. They act as a Holocaust commemoration, but in a way they're also a resource to combat anti-Semitism and the dangers of anti-Semitism. And in a moment, if it's okay, I don't know, Theo, can he English?
Yes.
Yes, he does. Okay, so maybe we can ask, because I suspect here you're going to have many more customers. I know we get a steady stream of inquiries for people interested to lay the stones. But yeah, I guess it's by marking their stories there, that in itself, Monica, acts as a resource to combat anti-Semitism.
I should also say that not only were we supported by the organisation of the Stolpersteine, but there was massive support from the people who lived in the blocks of flats outside which we placed them. So many of them came to the ceremony and were very conciliatory and kind. They talked about how they would look after the stones and they would polish them and keep them bright, so to speak. And also the family who lived in the apartment where my family used to live invited us for tea the afternoon of the ceremony.
Yeah, I mean, and similarly, we hear stories of new residents in apartment blocks of their own volition, researching who lived in the apartments previously because they were aware that maybe in a Jewish area, or if the flats had existed the block had existed for many years, there could have been Jewish owned in the past and what happened to them, and then organize themselves to have plaques and memorials outside. It's a personal question, I hope you won't mind, but do you, within your family, are you seen as the person who would organize the memorial to those who perished?
That's a loaded question, but yes, I think that is the answer.
Yeah.
Yes, I've made work about my family for a long time now, and I'm extremely interested in it as a source both of visual images and a subject matter to write about. So I suppose it came quite naturally. And I've also organised them for other members of the more distant family from Israel in Dresden.
Yeah. And a question I wanted to ask earlier, we talk about laying the stones. Within Germany, I find there's a stronger culture of remembrance about how the Holocaust was perpetrated and remembered. How did you find working with authorities in Germany and to organize the stones to be laid?
I have found in Germany nothing but kindness, helpfulness, and what one might hope for, German efficiency, but not in a way that one regards that as in any way derogatory, but in a really complimentary way. So I think, as far as I understand, and Theo can correct me, all the people who work for Stolpersteine are volunteers. And I was helped immeasurably both in Dresden and in Berlin.
Yeah. Well, and again, anecdotally, knowing the number of people who inquire to us or people known to us who have done this is big and growing, such as the popularity of the project. Theo, is it okay to bring you in here? I don't know if Susan, you can unmute him or.
Theo, I've just asked you to unmute if that's okay.
Yes. So now it works.
Hello, Theo. Nice to meet you
Hello.
as well.
Yes.
Just because I'm greedy and we have you here, can you give us a context? How many of these ceremonies are being organized now in Berlin?
Oh, well, in Berlin we have districts, and every district has its own group. And I'm working in the district Berlin Mitte, the center. And I can tell you we have about 350 requests for stones to be laid. And we have a waiting list. It takes about 3 years from the request till the setting of the stones. So it is, we have much to do. And another district, Charlottenburg, they can't accept any more requests because they are overwhelmed by requests and works. It's I started about 10 years ago. Here in our street, we put stones, and this was an initiative by the people, the neighborhood today. And we tried to find out who had lived here, and we tried to find contact with relatives who had survived. But now it's just the opposite. It's, I think, more than 90% of the requests come from members of families who had lived in Berlin. And now it's very well known in the Jewish world, and so we get requests from all over the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us and for all the work that is being done to commemorate the lives of individual people. I'm going to open the floor, as it were, to questions from the audience. You can either continue to, if you wanted to put it in a question in the chat, or just raise your hand and we can try and look through the screens to see if there are any hands raised. Just perhaps, Monica, if I can just come back to you. Let me just move that across. Just while we're seeing if anybody has a question for you. The Stolpersteine are not accepted, or they're not done in every city in Germany. For example, in Munich, it's somehow seen as not appropriate to walk on the names and the memorials of those who've perished. I'm wondering, from an artistic perspective, do you have a strong view about that, or how would you feel about people, I mean, stumbling across or stepping across the stones?
I think the etymology is quite interesting, because, of course, what has happened to Jewish cemeteries over many years is that they have been desecrated and the stones have been used and laid on the streets. So in some ways there is a history to the stones going on the street. I don't have a problem with it, but I do understand that people do. And I also think there's quite a sensitive issue about where they're put. And I'm very pleased that the stones that we've laid for the Petzal family in Berlin are actually laid just to the side of the entrance in a small cobbled area where they won't actually be walked on, but they're very visible. So I understand both sides of that. But I mean, I just discovered a couple of weeks ago, through doing a bit more research online, that one of my grandfather's brothers has a Stolpersteine on the Kurfürstendamm, which is a big main thoroughfare in Berlin. And of course, I knew very little about this man, and I've just discovered that this memorial is there. So I just think it's tremendous that Günther Deming started this project, and that age, I think he's 76 now, he's still making, together with colleagues, these memorial blocks.
He was in London last year. He did the first one in London, in Soho. for a lady who was briefly lived here, went back to Europe, and was deported to Auschwitz. So yes, he's very well known in the Jewish world. Do you know who did the stone for your grandfather then in the Kudam?
No, I don't. I have as yet to find that all out.
And actually, it was going to be a question I had, but Morris has asked it in the chat too, about whether there are Stolpersteine in the Netherlands and how names and individuals are remembered there.
I think there are Stolpersteiners, but Theo can tell as well. I think they're in every country in Europe now. There are certainly many in Holland. And I know you're referring to the one that was done in Golden Square, wasn't there?
Correct, yeah.
Yes. I think if you look at the website, stolpersteine.eu, it gives an enormous amount of information about the whole project. Yeah.
I can just see that Gabby Glassman, who on the call, nice to see you, Gabby, one of our trustees, and who would know, says yes, they are done in the Netherlands. Yeah. Let me just have a quick look if there are any hands up.
Michael, Gabby Essinger had a hand up. Let me just unmute you. I'm just asking if you want to unmute.
Gabby,
Gabby, you have to unmute. There we are.
Yes, I was wondering, in general, how the German population feel about the Stolpersteine. You mentioned it as regarding the ones that you were involved in, but are they people? Do you know whether the people are sympathetic to the idea or what?
That's a big question. I think it's like all things. In some places they aren't, and in some places they aren't. I do a lot of work in Dresden on behalf of a small charity I'm vice chair of called the Dresden Trust. And when we laid the Stolpersteine in Dresden, we laid some others, 4 of them, for a neighbor of our family at the same time, and those were stolen the next day, which was pretty shocking. So I think there is a massive right-wing presence in Dresden, and there's been the political organization Pegida, and obviously they were not in favor of the Stolpersteine. But as I said, my personal experience has only been a good one.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
what Theo would have to say about.
I was going to say, and also in the context of the information you put in the film about the number of incidents of anti-Semitism increasing, and the UK is not alone, and there are opinions as to drivers of that, whether that's what's happening in the Middle East or just otherwise. For example, you see it in relation to the vaccine, anti-vaxxers being linked to saying that what people are trying to do to them today is what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust. So you're making these kind of false equivalences as well. It's a very interesting subject. Theo, did you want to come in there on how the program is seen in Germany more widely? I think Susan might have to unmute you again. Or maybe I can do it. 1 second.
I am asking Theo to unmute.
Theo, can you see us? Can you hear us? Oh,
you need to unmute.
There we go.
Okay. I'll tell you what, while you're doing that, Theo, there's another point that's been made to me here. Someone says it's very difficult to lay stones in Poland, but a few have been successfully recently. And this lady's involved with a group in Poland. It's called Stolpersteine in Poland. We have about 250 members. So I'm taking a wild guess here, but I suspect that it might be more difficult in certain countries than in others. My own experience of working with you, working in Germany with colleagues in Germany is like you described, Monica. It's a much more positive experience. Jan, I can see you've raised your hand. Apologies if it's Jan or Jan.
Unmute as well.
Jan, you need to unmute. There we oh. You muted yourself. There we are.
Yes, I know. I had unmuted myself and then it bounced. They're very elastic, these mute buttons. I only wanted to make a very small observation, really, but I guess one I felt was important to say that one of the achievements of these efforts is it represents not just a recognition of anti-Semitism and a retort to that, but it also represents such an effort in the ongoing challenge to support and generate the capacity to think at all, which, as our observations are saying in these last few moments, is endemically difficult. The capacity to think and reflect is perpetually a challenge for human beings, and one avoided so often. So it's an immense gift to encourage us to think all the time. So thank you, Monica, and all. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Monica, perhaps I can
think
ask
Theo
you
is
now.
now unmuted if we want to come back to him.
Yes, it's
Oh yes, yeah, okay.
now it works. Personally, I didn't make bad experiences with people who are against Stolpersteine, but it happens. And sometimes, depends on the district, we inform the police when there is a setting of stones. And but the problem is perhaps after that the stones are destroyed, this happens. But I live in a street where there are 114 stones and nothing happened till now.
But there are examples of some stones
Yes.
being damaged
Yes.
or vandalized.
Yes, yes, this happens.
And are the numbers in the anti-Semitic incidents in Germany increasing as well?
Yes, I think so. It's by the statistics, it's like in many other countries, and but I think there is also more sensibility, and people, they go to the police easier than they did before, and I think there are more documents than there used to be now.
Yeah, I think that's well, certainly the recording of incidents and
Yes.
the categorization of them is a lot better than it used to be, and I suppose the access to that information is a lot easier to come by. Monica, I was going to ask about.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm a great supporter of the campaign against anti-Semitism, which I think is a really excellent organisation, which has grown enormously since it began just a few years ago. Again, that access to documentation and the way that they are able to take up cases, take them to court and fight anti-Semitism, at least in the UK, is really important. I mean, we've had two really awful examples just recently. If we ever needed reminding, we had the Labour MP Diane Abbott telling us that we Jews don't suffer racism. And we also had the Martin Rosen cartoon in The Guardian last week, which was just appalling.
Yes, we had some comments from our members about both of those incidents. And obviously the Diane Abbott one goes back many more years prior to that, with the whole leadership under Jeremy Corbyn, and I suspect that's a separate conversation that will also divide opinions. But yes, it's something if you live in this country and you're sensitized to the subject, it's you are clearly aware of it. I'm thinking, I was about to ask you about future projects and plans on Holocaust memories. I mean, where has the film been? Has it been shown elsewhere? What kind of reactions has it got? What are the future plans for it?
The film has not been shown anywhere else. My co-coordinator below, Eileen Herring-Woods, and I probably have some work to do on that. It's the first film I've made, and I'm very interested to perhaps make another film. I think it's a much easier medium to get out to people than making works of art on pieces of paper, which is what I do otherwise. And it's also easier than writing in some ways. So there will be plans afoot, and it will probably be more likely to be about Dresden, with which I'm very involved. And that in 2 years' time, it's the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Dresden. And it's probably going to be the final commemoration there, because the city has said it's time to end certain sorts of commemorations. And I think that the Stolpersteine are the most valuable sort of commemorations, because they're small and they're embedded into the fabric of the society, whereas some of the rather big commemorations can sometimes come and go.
Well, in which case, I'm delighted, and everybody here, you have witnessed the premiere of the film, and very glad that we were able to bring that to you. It's interesting what you say there, Monica, about the bigger events, because I know in Israel, where they've had almost a reaction to the big national commemorations like Yom HaShoah, and people have found them too impersonal. And so there is a trend now to inviting a survivor into a person's home, called Zikaron Basalon, remembrance in a room. And then the individual survivor talks to a dozen people, and then there's more intimate personal chat. And in a way, the stones are a personal interaction. You encounter it yourself, you look, you see what happened to that person. It's immediately obvious what's happened, what it's commemorating. But you could also go and find out more information. You can go online. So it's a sort of joining best of both worlds. Okay, there was another question here from Gabby in the chat. Do you know, Monica, why your parents settled in Hilversum, and how come they went there? Coincidentally, her grandparents were there as well.
From what I understand, they weren't first in Hilversum. They were somewhere on the coast, and they were chased out. And I think that, sorry, this particular family in Hilversum, how they connected to them, I don't know, but they offered them refuge, and they kept them safe for 3 years there. And the family were called Hummerling. And the interesting thing was that after the war, there was lots of legal complications. My father was trying to get restitution, and the Dutch authorities started coming after the family who had looked after our family. So rather than regarding them as saviors, they started trying to come after them for some sort of restitution. But I've probably got a bit more investigation to do there.
Thank you. And again, I hope you won't mind, it's a personal question, but since you mentioned restitution, have you explored taking up German citizenship? I
took up German citizenship in 2014 at the time of the announcement of the Brexit vote. And it's for that reason that my son and his wife now live in Amsterdam. And so my son has German citizenship, my grandchildren have German citizenship. And I'm a frequent visitor to Germany. And people who know me often ask me why I left London. And I say, well, I left London. And they say, would you go back to London? And I say, no, but I would go and live in Berlin, because I feel very at home in Germany.
That's interesting. Unsurprisingly, slightly loaded question, in as much as it's a lot of descendants of the German refugees, or even people who were resident in Germany, have taken up this option or exploring it, as they have done in other countries. It's become a very popular thing. Gabby is adding further clarification about the point you just made, Monica, that there was a German order that German Jews had to leave the coast and choose another town and register there within 3 days. So
That's really interesting.
that ties in. Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I may well have to ask Gabby about a little bit more knowledge about the Dutch situation.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of the session. Let me just have a quick look through if any other hands up. In which case, I can't see any. I'm sure I will be told otherwise. Monica, is there anything I've forgotten to ask that you wanted to additionally say about the film or about anti-Semitism, Holocaust Memorial? I mean, they're quite big subjects, but...
No, I think I'd like to say that I think the AJR does this tremendous work, and that I came away from the conference that we were at 2 weeks ago, the conference on testimony, with lots of thoughts about what to do. I have volunteered for Generation to Generation, which is the second generation network, which is in a way thinking about, I can't say replacing survivor testimony, but being what carries on after there are no more survivors, and how important it is. And I'm waiting for them to respond to me to see if I'm going to be suitable for their program.
Well, I'll see you there, because I've also done likewise. But thank you very much for today, and for sharing that your film, but also your personal story. Well, we always say that it's quite a brave thing. That's not to be falsely modest or whatever about it. It's a difficult thing to commit to sharing a story that's quite a painful one, quite an intimate one. But for sharing it, thank you very much for doing that, and for your film. And if we can help in some way of promoting it, promote that it exists, and goes to all of us here on the Zoom, then we should do so, because more information gets out there. And if you get a chance to look at Monica's website, please do so again. I wanted to give you the final word, but there has been one last question, which happens to be for Theo. If people wanted Theo to lay a stone in Berlin, can they still contact you? I mean, I know you said there's a 3-year delay or 3-year wait. Can they be added to the list? And should they contact you in the first place?
Of course. Our address is in the internet, Stolpersteine Berlin.de, and there you find all the details in German, in English, and our mail addresses, and it's quite easy to contact us.
Okay. Well,
Everybody
maybe just before I go, we'll find that address quickly, and I'll put it into the chat as well. But in the meantime, thank you, Theo, for your contributions as well. I'm not sure whether you were expecting to be speaking today, but thank you very much. And big thank you to Monica for sharing the film, and also to my colleague, Susan, who's organized this event, organized the meeting, and also Karen Diamond, who I know was involved with our discussion, Monica, in the first place to get this set up. So thank you all. We look forward to seeing you at future events, whether that's in person or online. Don't forget, if you're not yet a member, you're very welcome to become a member or to become a friend of the AJR, and to recommend others to join us as well. Looking forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much.